It was the sound of the clock that filled my mornings, steady, patient, unbothered by the passing of time. I used to think that sound meant peace, that it was the rhythm of a life well lived. Now, when I hear it, it feels more like a reminder of everything that's slipping quietly away. I'm 56, widow for 9 years. Mother of one, my son Daniel. I work at the community library in town, the same one I used to take him to when he was little. The place smells of old paper, pine wood polish, and dust, and somehow that's comforting. It reminds me of when things were simple, when Daniel still called me mommy. Back then, I used to come home from long shifts and find him on the couch, reading the same comic book for the fifth time. He'd run to me, wrap his small arms around my waist, and say, "Did you bring me a story today?" And I always did. I believed stories could protect us from the world. Maybe I still do. Now my house is quiet, too quiet. The laughter that used to echo through the halls has turned into silence. Daniel is 25, but sometimes when he speaks, it feels like I'm talking to a stranger who has my son's face. Before we go further, if you've ever raised a child, sacrificed for them, and then wondered if they still see you the same way, please like, subscribe, and share. Because this story isn't just mine. It's the story of every parent who's ever given everything and then been asked for more. That morning started like any other. The kettle whistled softly, and sunlight fell in narrow streaks across the kitchen table. I was sorting through bills, the electricity, the water, and my favorite envelope, my paycheck. It wasn't much, but it kept us afloat. Daniel was supposed to be at work. He'd been between jobs for months now, the kind of between that never seemed to end. He said things like, "I'm figuring myself out," or "the job market's a scam anyway." I wanted to believe he was just lost, not lazy. Around 10, I heard the front door creak open. "Daniel," I called out. He didn't answer at first, but I heard the heavy drag of his shoes across the floor. He appeared in the doorway, his hair unkempt, eyes tired but sharp in a way that made my stomach twist. "Hey," he said. "Hey, sweetheart, you're home early." "Didn't go," he replied flatly. "We need to talk." He sat down at the table, tapping his fingers against the wood. There was a strange heaviness in the air, not anger, but something close to it. "What's wrong?" I asked. He looked at the envelope in my hand, the one with my paycheck inside. "Mom, I need your help." I smiled softly. "You know I'll help you with anything." He leaned forward, his voice low and deliberate. "Then I need your paycheck." The words didn't register at first. I thought he was joking. I even let out a small laugh, the kind that dies halfway out. "Daniel, what are you talking about?" He didn't laugh, he didn't blink. "I'm serious, Mom. I need your paycheck this month, all of it." Something in me froze. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was how he said it, not as a request but as a demand. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Daniel, I've got bills, the mortgage, groceries." "I know," he cut in, "but I've got bigger problems. You'll survive, I won't." His words hit me like a slap. I wanted to ask what he meant, but I could already see it, the weight in his eyes, the nervous twitch of his jaw, debt, bad decisions, something dark lingering behind his silence. I looked down at the paycheck in my hand, the paper trembling slightly. "Daniel," I said softly, "you know I'll always help you, but taking everything I have." "Everything you have," he snapped. "You wouldn't have anything if it weren't for me. You worked all those extra shifts because of me. You bought this house for me. You told me you'd do anything for me, remember? Well, I'm cashing that in." His tone burned. The little boy who once asked for bedtime stories was gone. In his place sat a man I didn't recognize, a man who saw me not as his mother, but as a wallet that hadn't run dry yet. After he stormed out, the house felt heavier than it had in years. I stood there staring at the half-empty coffee cup on the table, the faint ring it left behind like a mark of shame. I kept asking myself, when did love turn into obligation? When did nurturing turn into negotiation? Maybe this was what people meant when they said parenting never ends. Because sometimes it doesn't end with goodbyes or graduations. Sometimes it ends when your child stops seeing you as a person. And that's when I decided, if my son could turn my sacrifices into debts, then maybe it was time I reminded him what happens when a mother finally stops paying. When Daniel was little, he used to follow me everywhere. If I went to the kitchen, he'd be right behind me with his small toy truck. If I went outside to water the plants, he'd tug at my dress and say, "Don't go too far, Mom. The sun's too big today." He was such a bright child, gentle, observant, almost too aware of the world. And after his father passed, he became my reason to keep breathing. I remember the night my husband died. Daniel was 16. He didn't cry, not at first. He just sat at the hospital corridor, staring at the vending machine light as if it could explain why life takes people away too soon. When we came home, he didn't speak for 3 days. And when he finally did, it was just one sentence. I'll take care of you now, Mom. Those words stayed with me for years. Every job I took, every night shift, every extra hour cataloging old books at the library, I did it with his future in mind. I saved for his college, paid for his first car, and even covered the rent on his apartment when he said he wanted to find independence. That's what made this moment, him demanding my paycheck, so unbearable. Because in his tone, I heard something that wasn't just need. It was resentment. If you've ever loved someone so deeply that you gave them everything, only to realize they stopped seeing your love as a gift, like subscribe and share. Because sometimes, love becomes invisible to the one who's received too much of it. That night after he left, I sat in the living room and stared at the photo wall. There he was, Daniel at 5, holding his first goldfish. Daniel at 10, grinning through a missing tooth. Daniel at 21, smiling with his college acceptance letter. And then Daniel at 24, his last birthday. I remembered how that photo was taken. He hadn't wanted a party, so I baked a small cake and bought a candle shaped like the number 24. When I brought it out, he just stared at it for a moment and said, "You don't have to do this, Mom, I'm not a kid." I smiled through the sting in my chest and said, "You'll always be my kid." He didn't smile back. He just said, "That's the problem." I didn't understand it then. But now, sitting in that same room surrounded by his old memories, I finally saw it clearly. Somewhere along the way, Daniel had started seeing my love as control, and my sacrifices as guilt traps. The next morning, I went about my routine like nothing had happened. I made coffee, folded laundry, and left for work. But I couldn't focus on the library's quiet hum of pages turning. My hands shook every time I thought of the way he'd looked at me, not with love, but with expectation. At lunch, Lena noticed my silence. She's been my friend for years, the kind who doesn't ask too many questions unless you look like you need her to. "You okay?" she asked gently. I forced a smile, just tired. "Daniel again." I looked at her, startled. "What makes you say that?" She shrugged. "Every time you say just tired, it's Daniel. What's he done this time?" I hesitated. "He asked for my paycheck." Her eyebrows shot up. Asked or demanded? The word hung between us. I didn't answer. She sighed, folded her arms, and said quietly, "You can't keep letting him drain you, Mags. He's an adult now." "I know," I whispered. But I didn't know how to stop. How do you turn off being a mother? When I came home that evening, the house felt strange, like someone had been there. At first, I thought I was imagining it. The sofa cushions were slightly off, the mail stack disturbed. But then I saw it. The small lockbox from my dresser, the one where I kept old letters and cash for emergencies, was gone. My heart stopped. I rushed to Daniel's room. He wasn't there, his laptop, his clothes all gone. There was only a note on the bed. It said in his handwriting, "Don't call me, I'll pay you back." I sat on the edge of the bed, numb. He'd taken my emergency savings, everything I had quietly tucked away over the years. And yet, beneath the shock, something inside me cracked open, not from pain, but from realization. For years, I had built my life around protecting him. And now he'd taken the one thing that forced me to finally protect myself. That night, as I sat alone, the streetlight flickering outside, a thought I never imagined thinking crossed my mind. What if the only way to get my son back is to let him lose me first? The next morning felt unreal, as if the night before had been a strange dream I couldn't quite wake from. The house was too quiet, too still, and yet I could feel his absence in every corner. The half-empty mug on the counter, the scent of his cologne faintly lingering in the hallway. Everything felt like a memory that hadn't finished happening. I stood in Daniel's empty room for what must have been an hour. His closet door hung open, revealing the small, forgotten things he'd left behind: a broken watch, a crumpled movie ticket, an old notebook filled with sketches and ideas. On the first page, in his messy handwriting, were the words, "One day I'll make her proud." I ran my fingers over the ink and my chest tightened. What happened to that boy? Where did the kindness go? The sunlight slanted through the blinds, painting stripes across the dusty floor. And in that quiet room, I made myself a promise: I wasn't going to chase him. Not yet. Not this time. If you've ever had to make the impossible choice between protecting your child and protecting your peace, like, subscribe and share. Because some stories aren't about letting go, They're about learning when holding on is slowly destroying you. For 2 days, I didn't hear from him. Not a text, not a call, nothing. I went to work, kept my head down, smiled when people spoke to me, but every time my phone buzzed, I flinched. On the third evening, the call finally came. Unknown numbers. I answered without thinking. Hello. A man's voice, rough, low. Is this Turner? Yes. This is Officer Briggs with County Police. We've recovered a vehicle registered in your name. It was abandoned off Route 39. My blood turned cold. My car. Yes, ma'am, a silver Civic. Found it last night. He hesitated. You're not in any trouble, but do you know a Daniel Turner? I closed my eyes. He's my son. Well, ma'am, his ID was in the car. No sign of him, though. We're still checking surveillance in the area. I gripped the counter to steady myself. Was there anything else, something that could tell you where he went? The officer paused. There was a bag, clothes mostly, some bills, and a note. My heart thudded painfully. What did it say? It just said, I'll fix it, Mom. After the call ended, I sank to the kitchen floor and cried, not the kind of cry that comes from fear but from exhaustion. That note was both a promise and a warning. Daniel wasn't gone forever. He was out there trying to clean up whatever mess he'd made. But the words, I'll fix it, echoed like a lie he was trying to tell himself. The next morning, I went to the police station to retrieve the car. The front bumper was dented. The inside smelled of gasoline and cold coffee. The glove compartment had been rummaged through, and there, shoved between old receipts, was another envelope. My name, written in Daniel's handwriting. Hands trembling, I opened it. Inside was a crumpled photo, me, him, and his father at the beach when Daniel was around 10. And on the back, in shaky pen marks, he'd written, I'm sorry I turned into someone you wouldn't recognize. I pressed the photo to my chest. The ache inside me shifted, less anger, more sorrow. Whatever Daniel was caught up in, it wasn't just irresponsibility. Something had changed him, something deep. That night, I found myself standing by the window, watching the empty street. For the first time in years, I didn't see Daniel as my little boy. I saw him as a man, one who had lost his way and maybe his soul, somewhere along the road. But then something strange happened. At around midnight, I heard a sound, a soft thud against the porch. I froze. I walked to the door slowly, the floor creaking beneath my feet. When I opened it, there was no one there. Just a small paper bag on the step. Inside were 3 things. My missing lockbox empty. A folded $20 bill. And a single playing card, the Queen of Hearts. I stood there in the cold night air, staring at it, my pulse pounding in my ears. It wasn't just an apology. It was a message. Something told me that Daniel hadn't just run away. He was involved in something that went far beyond me or my paycheck. And I realized then that my son might not just be lost. He might be in danger. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind against the window felt like a whisper, a reminder that the world I thought I understood was slipping away. The Queen of Hearts sat on the kitchen table, its glossy surface catching the flicker of the overhead light. It didn't belong. It felt planted like something with meaning, a sign I was supposed to notice. I stared at it for hours. Why that card? Why leave it with my lockbox? Daniel wasn't the kind of kid who played games like that. And yet I couldn't shake the memory of him as a teenager, sitting on the couch watching old crime thrillers with his dad. He used to say, I'd make a great detective someday, Mom, I notice everything. Maybe this was his way of leaving a clue. Before I tell you what happened next, I need you to do something for me. If you've ever had your heart torn between protecting someone and uncovering a truth that might destroy you, please like, subscribe, and share. Because this next part, it changed everything. The next morning, I took the card to work. It was a strange decision, but I couldn't just sit at home waiting. The library felt safe, familiar. But my mind wasn't on the books or the patrons. It was on that playing card, tucked into the side pocket of my bag like it was burning a hole through the fabric. At lunch, I showed it to Lena. She looked at it carefully. That's from a casino deck, she said. I frowned, you can tell. Yeah, look, see the logo in the corner? Casino. That's the one off the interstate near Route 39. My breath caught. Route 39, the same place where the police found Daniel's car. Lena looked up at me, concern deepening. Mags, your son's not gambling, is he? I shook my head slowly. He's never been into that stuff, at least not that I knew of. But now, the late-night phone calls, the sudden withdrawals from his savings, the constant stress he carried, it all started forming a picture I didn't want to see. That evening, I drove out toward Route 39. The sun was setting behind the hills, painting the sky in orange and gold, but my chest felt heavy like I was chasing a ghost. Casino sat just beyond the highway, its neon sign buzzing weakly in the dusk. I parked across the street and just watched. The parking lot was half empty, the air humming with the faint rhythm of slot machines and distant laughter. After a few minutes, I got out of the car and walked in. The place smelled of smoke and desperation. Men hunched over tables, faces lit by the glow of screens and cards. A woman in a red dress brushed past me, her perfume sharp and sweet. I wasn't there to play, I was there to see. I walked past the blackjack tables, scanning faces, listening for a name. Daniel, Danny, anything. And then, near the bar, I heard it. "Hey, you seen Danny Turner lately?" The voice came from a man in a leather jacket, speaking to the bartender. I froze. The bartender shook his head. "Not since last week, he still owes $1,000 though, tell him the clock's ticking." The man smirked. "If he doesn't show soon's gonna come looking for mommy next." I gripped the counter for balance. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear the rest. They were talking about me. I left the casino before they could notice me, hands trembling as I gripped the steering wheel. The road home felt endless. The Queen of Hearts was still in my bag, mocking me almost. Now I understood. It wasn't just a card, it was a warning. Daniel hadn't just taken my money because he was reckless. He'd taken it because he was desperate, because someone dangerous was involved. And maybe he'd left that card to tell me who. When I got home, I went straight to my room and pulled out the old family photo album. I didn't even know what I was looking for, maybe a clue, maybe a reminder of who my son used to be. But as I flipped through the pages, something slipped out, a small business card, tucked behind a photo of Daniel's high school graduation. It read, Crane Investments. The logo was identical to the one on the casino card. My stomach turned cold. I flipped the card over. On the back, in Daniel's handwriting, were 3 words. Don't trust. That night I sat in the dark, staring at those words. My son had left me a trail, and I was beginning to see where it led. But I couldn't shake one terrifying thought. If Daniel was in trouble with, how long before came looking for me? Sleep didn't come that night. Every sound felt amplified, the ticking clock, the sighing pipes, even the whisper of the curtains brushing against the window. But beneath it all, one thought kept echoing in my mind like a storm trapped in a bottle. Don't trust. I stared at Daniel's handwriting over and over until the letters blurred together. His warning wasn't just about a man, it was about something much bigger, something I wasn't meant to find. Morning came slow and gray. The coffee pot hissed and spat, the radio played softly in the background, and my hands shook as I poured my cup. I'd lived through losing my husband, through raising a child alone, through nights when the bills outweighed the food in the fridge. But this uncertainty was different. It wasn't grief or struggle, it was fear. Still, fear had never stopped me before. If you've ever faced a moment where you knew not knowing could destroy you just as much as the truth itself, hit like and subscribe. Because sometimes we walk into the dark not to find answers, but to prove we're brave enough to keep walking. I took the business card to work again. Lena noticed it immediately. You're still digging into this, huh? She asked, raising an eyebrow. I can't stop now, I said quietly. He's in trouble, I can feel it. Lena leaned closer. You think this guy's dangerous? I hesitated. Daniel warned me not to trust him, and the police found his car near that casino. It can't be a coincidence. She frowned. I know someone who might help. My cousin works in debt recovery. Not exactly legal stuff, but she hears things. I'll make a call. Her words gave me a sliver of hope, thin but sharp enough to hold on to. By afternoon, Lena came back with a grim look. She said, voice low, Crane isn't just a casino guy. He runs a private money ring, loans, collections, you name it, but he doesn't play by the rules. My stomach twisted. You mean illegal loans? She nodded. People say if you owe him, you either pay or disappear. I pressed a hand to my mouth. Oh my God, Daniel. Lena placed a hand on mine. If your son got involved with it wasn't for fun, he must been desperate. I nodded numbly. He took my savings. That hit her hard. Then whatever debt he's paying, it's not small. That night I went through Daniel's things again. The room smelled faintly of cedar and old laundry detergent. His drawers were half empty but tucked behind a loose panel in the back of his desk. I found something strange, a small flash drive wrapped in a folded napkin. My heart pounded as I plugged it into my laptop. It wasn't photos or documents. It was a single video file timestamped 2 weeks ago. The video opened to Daniel's face. He was in his car, engine off, parked somewhere dark. His eyes were tired, haunted. "Mom," he said softly, voice trembling. "If you're watching this, it means I didn't come back. I'm sorry, I thought I could fix it." He paused, looked around nervously. "I borrowed money from someone I shouldn't have. Said he could help me double it fast. I was stupid. I thought I could handle it. But it's bad, Mom, real bad." He swallowed hard. "If they come asking about me, don't believe what they say. Don't trust anyone from not the casino, not the investors, no one. They're laundering money through fake charities and they use people like me to move it. I was supposed to hand off some cash last week, but I took it. I had to. I thought if I paid them back in full, they'd leave me alone." He gave a weak smile. "You always said love makes people do stupid things. Guess you were right." Then his voice dropped to a whisper. "If anything happens to me, don't go looking. Please, just get far away from here." The video ended with him glancing over his shoulder, and a faint flash of headlights through the back window. Then black. I sat there frozen, the screen reflecting my pale face. My son wasn't just lost, he was hunted. And worse, he thought he could handle it alone. But I wasn't going to let him disappear. The next day, I called the police again and asked for Officer Briggs. When he picked up, I told him about the flash drive. He was quiet for a long time before saying, "Ma'am, if what your son said is true, this isn't just about gambling. These people run deep." "I don't care," I said firmly. "He's my son. I'm not sitting around while he's in danger." He sighed. "Then you need to be careful. It's not someone you mess with. I'll send someone to collect the evidence, but don't confront anyone. Promise me that." I didn't answer because I knew something he didn't. I wasn't planning to wait for help. I was going to find myself. That night, I stood outside my house with the flash drive in one hand and the Queen of Hearts in the other. The sky was heavy with clouds, the air electric with the scent of rain. I looked up and whispered into the wind, "You're not alone, Daniel, not anymore." As thunder rumbled in the distance, I got into my car and started the engine. And with a calm I didn't recognize, I drove toward the one place I swore I'd never go again, casino. Because sometimes, the only way to pull someone out of the dark is to step into it yourself. The rain began just as I reached the highway, heavy, unrelenting. Each drop smacked the windshield like a warning I refused to hear. My wipers fought to keep up, but my thoughts were louder than the storm outside. What if I'm too late? What if he's already gone? Every scenario played in my mind, Daniel trapped, hurt, or worse. But another thought cut deeper than fear. What if I was part of why he ended up there? Sometimes, being a mother means carrying guilt for choices you didn't even know you made. If you've ever felt that weight, that haunting "did I fail them" feeling, hit like, subscribe, and share this story. Because this part isn't about the danger ahead, it's about the doubts that almost stopped me from facing it. By the time I reached casino, the rain had turned to mist. The neon lights shimmered on the wet pavement, painting the world in red and blue. I parked behind the building, heart pounding as I stared at the back entrance. Two men stood under a flickering lamp, smoking. One wore a black leather jacket, the same kind the man at the bar had worn days ago. The other held a phone, laughing at something on the screen. I waited until they walked inside, then slipped through the side door. The hallway smelled of bleach and stale beer. I followed the sound of muffled voices and clinking glass, my shoes squeaking on the tile. A door ahead was marked "Private, Staff Only." And taped just above the handle, barely visible, was another playing card. The Queen of Hearts. My pulse stopped. Someone knew I was coming. I stepped back, my breath quick and shallow. Then I heard it, faint but distinct, a voice on the other side of the door. "The kid's mom, she knows something. If she talks to the cops, done." It was that same rough tone I'd heard before. "The man from the bar." "She won't talk," another voice said. "She's scared." A pause. "Then make her scared." The door opened a crack. I darted behind a stack of crates, heart hammering in my throat. The man in the leather jacket stepped out, scanning the hallway. Then slowly he lit a cigarette and muttered, "Moms always think they can save their boys. Let's see how far she gets." I didn't breathe until he was gone. When I finally made it back to my car, I gripped the steering wheel and screamed. Not out of fear, out of rage. They thought I was weak, they thought fear would keep me quiet. They didn't know who I was yet. But as I started the car, something caught my eye, a folded paper tucked under my wiper. I opened it carefully. Inside, scrawled in ink, were 5 words. You shouldn't have come back. My stomach dropped. Whoever wrote that had been close enough to touch my car. I looked around the parking lot, empty, silent. Only the sound of rain. That night, I drove home with my hands trembling on the wheel. The rain followed me the whole way, like the sky refused to let me escape. I parked in front of my house and sat there for a long time. The porch light flickered. My reflection in the mirror looked like a stranger, pale, wild-eyed, exhausted. Inside, the house felt colder than before. I locked every door, checked every window twice, and finally sat at the kitchen table. The Queen of Hearts lay in front of me. 2 of them now. One from Daniel. One from them. A message and a threat. But as I stared at them side by side, I noticed something strange. Both cards had faint markings near the top corner, barely visible, like tiny indents pressed into the paper. I grabbed a flashlight and held it at an angle. Letters began to appear, carved so lightly they could have been fingerprints. The first card said, "Trust only blood." The second one, "But not your own." I froze. The words didn't make sense until they did. Because there was one person left Daniel might have trusted. Someone he'd grown close to in the months before he changed. His uncle, my husband's brother, Tom. Tom had always been charming, too charming sometimes. He'd show up with gifts, promise Daniel connections, talk about easy money. I'd brushed it off as uncle-nephew bonding. But now, I wondered if Tom was the one who'd introduced him to in the first place. If that was true, then this wasn't just about my son. It was about family. And that realization cut deeper than anything Crane could ever do. I didn't sleep that night. My mind kept replaying those carved words on the cards. Trust only blood, but not your own. It felt like a riddle designed to break me, and yet the longer I thought about it, the more it pointed toward one man, Tom. Tom, my late husband's brother. The fun uncle, the one who showed up uninvited with pizza, promised Daniel shortcuts to success, and always seemed to know more about our finances than he should. Morning came with a haze of gray light creeping through the blinds. The air felt heavy, charged. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the second Queen of Hearts, its red ink glowing faintly in the dimness. I didn't want to believe Tom was involved, but deep down I already knew. Still, before I confronted him, I needed answers. If you've ever been torn between love and suspicion, that ache of wondering whether family could also be your enemy, hit like, subscribe, and share. Because this part is where love starts to fracture. By noon, I drove to Tom's garage. He owned a small auto repair shop on the edge of town, a place that always smelled of oil and betrayal. When I stepped out of the car, he was already outside, wiping his hands with a rag, that same sly grin spreading across his face. "Well, look who finally came by," he said. "You never visit unless you need something." "Do you have a minute?" I asked, keeping my tone steady. "For you, always." He led me inside. The garage was cluttered, old tires stacked high, tools scattered, and in the corner, a sleek black car I didn't recognize. Tom noticed me looking at it. "New client," he said quickly. "High-end stuff, pays well." I didn't respond. My eyes drifted to the walls, covered with photographs, including one of Daniel. It was an old photo taken last year at Tom's barbecue. Daniel was smiling then, genuinely smiling. That smile now felt like a ghost. "I found something," I said finally, "something of Daniel." Tom tilted his head. "Yeah." He mentioned a man named Crane. His smile faltered, just a flicker but enough for me to see it. He turned away, pretending to clean his hands again. "That name doesn't ring a bell." I stepped closer. "Don't lie to me, Tom. I went to casino. I know that's where this started." He froze, then laughed, a short, cold sound. "You went there? Jesus, you really don't know when to stay out of things." "What did you do?" I demanded. He turned, eyes hard now. "What I did was try to help your son. He came to me, remember, said he needed money fast. I connected him with someone who could help." Yeah, but I didn't know he'd be stupid enough to cross the guy." I felt the room tilt. "So you just handed him over, you knew who was." Tom's expression darkened. "I warned him, told him not to take more than he could pay back, but Daniel was your kid through and through, thought he was smarter than everyone." I clenched my fists. He's missing Tom. That got his attention, his mouth opened slightly. Missing. I nodded. The police found his car abandoned 2 weeks ago. For a moment, his bravado cracked. Then he muttered something under his breath, too quiet to catch. What did you say? I asked. He looked up, eyes suddenly sharp. You shouldn't have come here. Why? He tossed the rag aside. Because doesn't like loose ends, and you, he jabbed a finger at me, you're about to become one. My pulse raced. Are you threatening me? No, he said softly. I'm warning you, walk away, forget Daniel, forget me, just let it go. I stared at him, trying to find the brother-in-law I once trusted, the man who'd held Daniel as a baby, who'd toasted my husband's memory at his funeral. But there was nothing left of that man now, just greed and fear wrapped in a familiar face. I can't, I whispered. He sighed, almost pitying. Then you're signing your own death warrant. As I turned to leave, something caught my eye, a red envelope sitting on his workbench, partially hidden beneath a stack of invoices. The same color as the Queen of Hearts. Tom, I said quietly, what's that? He moved quickly, too quickly, trying to block it, but I grabbed it first. Inside was a check, not from a bank, from investments. Payable to Thomas. Amount $50,000. I looked up, and in that instant, everything clicked. He hadn't just introduced Daniel to. He'd sold him out. You took their money, I whispered, trembling. You let my son fall into their hands for $50,000. Tom's face twisted, shame, anger, guilt, all fighting for control. It wasn't supposed to go this way, he muttered. He was supposed to pay it back and everyone would walk away clean. And now he's gone. He didn't answer. The silence between us was thick and suffocating. Then he said the one thing that shattered what was left of my restraint. He should known better, just like his father didn't. I froze. What does that mean? Tom smirked. You think Robert was some kind of saint? He owed too. That's how it all started. The world stopped spinning. My late husband, the man I had buried, mourned, and loved for 20 years, was connected to this. I stumbled back. You're lying. Am I? He said, voice low. Why do you think took Daniel's call so fast? He knew the name. Turner, he said, that family still owes me. I felt my knees weaken. Tom sighed, rubbing his temples. You were never supposed to find out. I left before he could say another word. Outside, the rain had started again, soft at first, then heavier, like the sky itself wanted to hide what I'd just learned. My husband, my brother-in-law, my son. All tied to the same name, Crane. I gripped the steering wheel until my hands hurt. If what Tom said was true, then the nightmare hadn't started with Daniel. It had started decades ago, and I'd been living inside it without knowing. I drove home without seeing the road. The rain blurred the world into streaks of gray and red, the traffic lights dissolving like bleeding wounds on the windshield. Tom's words kept repeating in my head. He owed too. That's how it all started. My husband, Robert. The man I thought was the steady one, the calm to my storms. Had he really been part of this? I wanted to believe Tom was lying, but there had been signs. Things I'd ignored. The nights Robert came home late with that strange smell of cigarette smoke and stress. The time I found a wad of cash in his jacket pocket, more than we could possibly afforded. And the night he woke up screaming a name I didn't recognize, Crane. At the time, I thought it was just a nightmare. Now I wasn't so sure. If you've ever had to face the possibility that someone you loved might been living a lie. That moment where love and betrayal become the same thing. Hit like and subscribe. Because what comes next is the hardest part of any truth, the looking back. When I got home, the house felt unfamiliar, like it belonged to someone else. The photos on the wall, the framed wedding picture on the mantel, even the chair Robert used to sit in, they all stared back at me like silent witnesses. I poured myself a glass of water, but my hand trembled so badly it spilled. Somewhere in this house was proof. I could feel it. I went into the study, the one room I hadn't touched since Robert died. The air smelled of old paper and dust. His handwriting was still on the corkboard, notes, bills, and faded receipts. Then, tucked behind a stack of business envelopes, I found a small black notebook. Robert's handwriting. The first few pages were ordinary, grocery lists, reminders, a few sketches. Then, halfway through, I saw a name circled several times. R. Crane, loan 1998. Below it, don't tell. My stomach twisted. I flipped through more pages. There were lists of amounts, payments, debts, coded initials. At the bottom of one page, TK 50K handled. TK Tom. I sank to the floor, clutching the notebook like it was a piece of him I didn't recognize. My husband had owed Crane money, and Tom had handled it, meaning this family had been trapped in that man's grip for over 2 decades. I closed my eyes and tried to remember that last morning before Robert's car crash. He had been so quiet at breakfast, his hands trembling as he poured his coffee. He said, "If anything happens to me, promise me you'll stay away from Tom." I'd laughed, thinking he was just being dramatic. But what if he was? What if the crash wasn't an accident? A cold chill ran through me. That night I sat in the living room surrounded by ghosts, Robert's pictures, Daniel's voice from the video still haunting my laptop screen, and the rain whispering secrets against the glass. I didn't want to believe any of it, but denial couldn't save anyone anymore. So I opened the notebook again and began connecting the dots. Every debt Robert had listed led back to the same business name. Investments. The same name printed on Tom's $50,000 check. The same name Daniel mentioned in his final video. That's when I realized it wasn't just a casino, it was a front. And everyone I loved had been caught in its web. I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I drove to the police station and demanded to speak with Officer Briggs again. He looked tired, skeptical, but when I showed him Robert's notebook, the color drained from his face. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "this isn't just a family issue. This is organized crime." "I don't care what you call it," I said. "They took my husband, they took my son, you have to stop them." He sighed. "We've been trying to build a case against Crane for years. He's slippery. We never get enough evidence to make anything stick." I leaned forward, eyes burning. "Then maybe now you do." I handed him the notebook and the flash drive. Briggs promised to send them to the task force, but something in his tone told me not to wait around. I left the station feeling both lighter and heavier. I had done the right thing, turned over evidence, trusted the law. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't be enough. Because when I got home, I found my front door slightly open. The hallway light was on. And on the kitchen table, placed neatly beside the Queen of Hearts cards, was a new one. The King of Hearts. Written across it in Daniel's handwriting were 4 words. "Mom, it's not over." My heart stopped. I spun around, expecting someone to be there, but the house was empty. No broken locks, no footprints, no signs of forced entry. Only that card. And Daniel's handwriting. Which meant one impossible thing. Either my son had come back, or someone wanted me to think he had. The King of Hearts sat on my kitchen table like a bloodstain. It didn't belong there, yet it looked perfectly placed, intentional, mocking, almost poetic. "Mom, it's not over." I must read those words 100 times that night, tracing every curve of the handwriting, every pressure mark of the pen. It was Daniel's handwriting. I knew it the way a mother knows her child's laugh in a crowded room. But that couldn't be possible. Unless he wasn't dead. For hours I sat in silence. The house creaked, the clock ticked, and somewhere outside the rain began again. It always seemed to rain when the truth tried to find me. When dawn came, I hadn't slept. My coffee had gone cold hours ago. And then, just as I was about to collapse from exhaustion, my phone rang. Unknown number. For a moment I thought it would be him. I almost whispered "Daniel" before I even answered. But the voice on the other end wasn't my son's. "Mrs. Turner." "Yes." "This is Officer Briggs. I need you to come down to the station. We found something." If you've ever felt your world tilt between hope and terror in a single heartbeat. When a phone call feels like salvation and doom wrapped together. Like, subscribe, share, comment. Because this next part isn't just discovery, it's collapse. When I arrived, Briggs didn't meet me in the lobby. He led me straight to the evidence room, his face unreadable. Laid out on the table were 3 items. 1, a torn leather wallet. 2, a broken wristwatch. 3, a photograph, damp, faded, but unmistakable. Daniel and me at his graduation. My knees nearly buckled. Where did you find these?" I asked. He hesitated. "An abandoned warehouse down by the docks, belonged to one of Crane's shell companies. We were investigating a shipment and found these in a locked storage room." I clutched the edge of the table. Was there a body? No, he said carefully, no body, but the room was cleaned recently, too recently. Cleaned. He nodded, no dust, no debris. Someone was there within the last 48 hours. My pulse raced, then he's alive. Mrs. Turner, Briggs said gently, we don't know that yet. But his eyes told me he wanted to believe it too. I asked to see the warehouse myself, but he refused. It's an active investigation, he said. Still, that didn't stop me. That night, I drove there anyway. The docks were deserted, lit only by flickering orange streetlights. I found the warehouse easily. It was the only one still guarded by silence. The padlock on the side door had already been broken. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of metal, rust, and something else, bleach. The floor glistened faintly under my flashlight. And then on the far wall, I saw it, spray-painted in crimson. Trust only blood. The same phrase from the first Queen of Hearts. Underneath it, a date, June 12th. That was tomorrow. My hands shook as I took a photo. Something was going to happen, something tied to that date. And Daniel, alive or not, was at the center of it. I turned to leave, but a sound stopped me. Footsteps. I killed my flashlight and pressed myself against the wall. The footsteps grew louder, closer. Then a voice, low and familiar, said, You shouldn't have come here. I froze. It was Tom. He stepped into the faint light seeping through the cracks in the roof, his face half-shadowed. How did you find this place? He asked. Why does it matter? I hissed. Where, Daniel? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. You really don't know when to quit, do you? Quit, I snapped. He's my son, Tom. You got him into this. He stepped closer, eyes dark. You think this is about your son? You think this is about you? Then what is it about? Tom hesitated. For a moment his mask slipped and I saw fear, real human fear. It's about survival, he whispered. Crane doesn't forget debts, not yours, not Robert's, not Daniel. What are you talking about? He looked at me, eyes wet now. Crane wanted blood, your husband offered his, but when Robert died too soon, Crane came for Daniel instead. I shook my head. No, that's not possible, he didn't know any of this. Tom's voice broke. He knew enough. He came to me, begged me for help. I told him the only way out was to deliver what his father owed. I stared at him, horrified. What does that even mean? He swallowed. You. The word echoed like a gunshot. What? Tom looked away, shame flooding his face. Crane didn't want money this time. He wanted control, leverage. He wanted you. Daniel agreed to meet him to make a trade. I stumbled back, my stomach twisting. You're lying. I wish I was. The world tilted. I could barely stand. So what happened? I asked weakly. Tom sighed. He didn't show, he ran. Crane's men went after him, and now you've started looking where you shouldn't. My voice cracked. Where is he, Tom? Tell me. I don't know, Tom yelled, slamming his fist against the wall. Crane keeps his secrets locked up in the grave. Then I'll find him myself. He stared at me for a long time, then whispered, If you go after Crane, you'll end up like Robert. I took a shaky step toward him, then so be it. He looked at me, something flickering behind his eyes, regret, maybe even admiration. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small folded note. He left this, Tom said quietly, for you. I grabbed it before he could change his mind. Daniel's handwriting again. Mom, if you find this, go to where Dad took me fishing for the first time. You'll understand everything. I looked up, but Tom was gone. Just like that, vanished into the shadows. I stood alone in that warehouse, holding the note, the paint still dripping on the wall behind me. Outside, thunder rumbled low and angry across the bay. June 12th. Tomorrow. That's when it would all come to an end. One way or another. The lake was quiet that morning. Too quiet. The air hung thick with fog, curling low over the water like it was trying to hide the past buried beneath it. The same lake where Robert had once taught Daniel to fish, the same spot where laughter used to echo, where our family still felt whole. Now it looked like a ghost of its former self. Empty, cold, waiting. The note had said, Go to where Dad took me fishing for the first time. You'll understand everything. Those words pulsed in my mind as I parked near the old dock. It had been years since I'd been there, not since Robert's death. The path was overgrown, the boards rotting with time, but the moment my foot touched the dock, something in me cracked. This place wasn't just a memory, it was a wound that had never closed. If you've ever stood in a place that used to hold joy and felt only the ache of what you lost, then you know what I felt that morning. Like, subscribe, and share, because this isn't the part where hope returns. This is the part where the truth starts to bleed. The fog thickened as I stepped closer to the end of the dock. The planks creaked under my weight, moaning like they wanted to warn me away. And then I saw it, a small, weathered tackle box sitting beside an old post, half hidden beneath a torn tarp. It was the same one Robert used to carry on fishing trips. My chest tightened. I knelt and opened it. Inside, everything was perfectly arranged: hooks, lines, and a small metal tin. But tucked beneath the tray, wrapped in plastic, was something new. A small flash drive. And a folded photo. The photo was of Daniel, maybe a year ago, standing beside a man I didn't recognize. The man was tall, with sharp eyes and a smug smile. Behind them was a black car, its license plate blurred but partly visible. And on the back of the photo, in Daniel's handwriting, "This is him, Mom, this is Crane." My hands began to shake. So he had found him. He'd gotten close enough to take a picture, close enough to be seen. Which meant Daniel hadn't been running for himself. He'd been trying to finish what his father started. The flash drive was labeled simply "Truth." I plugged it into my phone using a converter and waited. There was a single video file. When it played, my breath caught. It was Daniel this time. It was Robert. He was sitting in his truck, looking older than I remembered, tired, gaunt, like he hadn't slept in days. The date stamp read 3 days before his accident. He said softly, his voice trembling, "If you're seeing this, it means I didn't make it out." I froze. I thought I could fix it. I took a loan from years ago to keep the business alive, but when it fell apart, I couldn't pay him back. I tried to cut a deal. Tom said he'd help, but he was already working for. I didn't see it until it was too late. He looked away, eyes glistening. I tried to protect Daniel from all this. He was just a kid. I swear I kept him out of it. But doesn't forget. He said the debt would never die with me, it would live in my bloodline. He paused, his hand trembling as he wiped his face. "If you ever find out, promise me one thing: don't trust Tom. And don't go to the police, has people everywhere. Just take Daniel and run, please, that's all that matters." The video flickered, and then, faintly, Robert looked directly into the camera and said, "Tell Daniel I love him, and tell him I'm sorry for what comes next." The screen went black. I sat there on the dock, the fog curling around me, tears running down my face. Robert's last message, his confession, answered everything and nothing at once. He'd died trying to protect us. And Daniel had gone back into that darkness trying to end it. I screamed into the mist, the sound swallowed by the water. The ache inside me finally tore open. When I could breathe again, I noticed something else in the box, a small, folded map. It marked a spot just beyond the lake near the woods. Written beside the red X were the words, "Where it all begins." I stared at it for a long time. That phrase, "where it all began," it wasn't just about the lake. Robert had used those exact words once before, years ago, when we talked about buying this property. He said, "This is where everything will begin for us." Now I realized he hadn't meant our future. He'd meant the truth. The sun began to burn through the fog, thin streaks of gold slicing across the water. I folded the map and whispered, "I'm coming for you, Daniel." Because now I knew. If my husband's final act was trying to protect us, then mine would be to finish what he couldn't, even if it destroyed me. The woods behind the lake were thicker than I remembered. Each step I took sank into damp earth, the crunch of branches beneath my boots swallowed by the silence. It felt like the trees themselves were holding their breath, waiting to see if I'd go through with it. The map in my hand shook as I followed the faint trail Robert had marked. The words kept echoing in my head, "Where it all began." I didn't know what I'd find there, but I knew what I needed: a closure. Not just for Robert, not just for Daniel, for me. If you've ever walked into the unknown with only your heartbeat for company, if you've ever needed the truth more than your own safety, then you'll understand what I felt right then. Like, subscribe, and share. Because this isn't the moment I broke. This is the moment I started becoming unbreakable. After 20 minutes, the trees opened into a small clearing. The fog thinned, revealing what looked like an old cabin, collapsed roof, vines crawling up its sides, a broken window like an open wound. I froze. This was where Robert used to bring Daniel camping. I remembered the photo, the one Daniel had drawn on the back of his fishing license when he was 10. This exact cabin. Only now it looked wrong. Like it had been abandoned on purpose. I walked slowly toward it, my breath visible in the chill morning air. The front door hung crooked, the hinges rusted but still strong. When I pushed it open, the smell hit me first: mildew, smoke, and faint traces of something metallic. Inside, the floor was littered with debris: papers, old cans, a broken lantern. But near the back wall, under a tarp, something glinted. I lifted the tarp and found a large metal lockbox. No key, no markings. For a long moment, I just stared at it. It felt heavier than its size, as if it carried years of secrets inside. I dragged it outside into the light. When I tried prying it open with a rock, the latch finally gave way with a metallic snap. Inside were three things. 1, a bundle of cash wrapped in twine. 2, a sealed envelope addressed to R. Crane. 3, a silver locket I hadn't seen in over 20 years. My locket. The one I'd lost after Robert's funeral. I held it, my fingers trembling. Inside was our family photo, me, Robert, and baby Daniel. But on the back, someone had etched a single word. Dead. I felt the air leave my lungs. Robert hadn't just borrowed money. He'd given up us. This cabin wasn't just a hideout. It was an exchange point, a place where deals were made, where lives were bought and sold. And then I saw something else, carved into the inside of the lockbox lid. What's taken in blood can only end in blood. The words were jagged, almost frantic, as if someone had carved them in a hurry. A chill ran through me. Robert's final warning in his video suddenly made sense. He said the debt would live in my bloodline. I sank onto the ground, the forest spinning around me. Everything, every lie, every loss, every disappearance had led back here. This wasn't a debt of money. It was a debt of blood. Hours passed. I don't know how long I sat there before my phone buzzed. Unknown number, again. I almost didn't answer, but something in me said you have to. When I picked up, the voice on the other end was distorted, low, mechanical. You found it. My blood ran cold. Who is this? You should stayed out of this. You had a good life. You could kept it. My hand shook. Where's my son? A pause, then a quiet laugh. Still asking the wrong questions. Where is he? Alive for now, but every debt must be paid, and you're late. Then the line went dead. The phone slipped from my hand, hitting the dirt. Alive. Daniel was alive. But that voice, it had to be Crane. He knew I'd come here. He wanted me to. The realization hit like a stone to the chest. This wasn't discovery, it was invitation. The cabin, the box, the clues, all of it had been left for me to find. And now he knew I had. I looked around the clearing one last time. The silence of the forest was heavier now, almost suffocating. When I turned to leave, I saw something scratched into the bark of a nearby tree, fresh, carved deep. Tom 612. Tomorrow's date. The same one painted on the warehouse wall. Whatever was about to happen, Tom was part of it. And if Daniel was still alive, that meant he was running out of time. As I walked back to my car, the weight of isolation sank in fully. There was no one left to trust. Not the police, not family, not anyone. But there was one thing I still had. My resolve. Because now, this wasn't about fear. It was about finishing it. The drive back from the lake was a blur of shadows and headlights. Every tree on the roadside looked like it was leaning toward me, whispering what I already knew: there was no turning back now. I had seen too much, heard too much, felt too much. And yet, for the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't afraid. I was angry. Angry at Robert for leaving this mess behind. Angry at Tom for feeding it. Angry at myself for pretending not to see the cracks forming all those years ago. Sometimes reflection isn't peaceful. It isn't a quiet moment of acceptance. Sometimes reflection feels like a blade, slicing through every lie you told yourself just to survive. If you've ever felt that, like, subscribe, and share. Because this is the part where truth stops whispering and starts screaming. When I got home, I laid everything out on the table. Robert's notebook, Daniel's flash drives, the photo of Crane, and the lockbox items from the cabin. A whole lifetime of secrets lined up like evidence. But as I stared at them, something strange clicked. The dates didn't line up. Robert's last payment to Crane had been recorded 3 months after his death. That was impossible, unless someone else had continued it. I flipped through the notebook again and found a small note written in a different pen. At first glance, it looked like Robert's handwriting, but the slant was wrong. It said, "Debt settled, MT." My heart stopped. MT. Turner. My name. I tried to steady my breathing. Someone had forged my signature. Someone had pretended I paid Crane. But why? My mind went back to that day after Robert's funeral. Tom had insisted on handling the paperwork. He'd brought me documents to sign, saying they were insurance forms. I never read them, I just signed where he told me to. My stomach twisted. He hadn't been helping me close Robert's accounts. He'd been taking them over. I grabbed my phone and opened my email, searched through years of forgot messages. Buried deep in a spam folder was one from finance. The subject line, "Debt fulfilled, account transferred." I opened it and there it was. My name, my digital signature. But the document showed the funds had been wired not to close the account, but to open a new one. Under Tom's name. I leaned back in my chair, shaking. It was all a setup. Robert had died trying to free us, and Tom had taken his place, making sure Crane's grip never loosened. And Daniel must found out. That's why he ran. That's why he left clues instead of coming home. He wasn't hiding from me. He was protecting me from them. The sound of my front door unlocking jolted me from my thoughts. I froze. Footsteps. Slow, heavy, confident. I grabbed the poker from beside the fireplace and moved toward the hallway. The figure stepped into view, silhouetted against the faint porch light. "Tom," I breathed. He looked worse than before, tired, pale, like he'd been running, but his eyes were still sharp. He said softly, "We need to talk." "You forged my name," I said. "You sold Robert's debt under me." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "I didn't have a choice." "You always have a choice," I snapped. "You just never pick the right one." He looked up, pain flickering across his face. "You think this was about money, about greed? You don't get it, do you? Once you're in with Crane, you don't get out. You just last longer if you obey." I gripped the poker. "Then what are you doing here now?" He hesitated. "I came to warn you, he's coming for you tonight." My blood went cold. "Crane." Tom nodded. "You've stirred too much up. He knows you've been digging. He knows you found the video." My voice cracked. "Where, Daniel?" Tom's eyes darted away. "Alive, but barely. Crane's using him as leverage to keep you quiet." I stepped closer. "Then take me to him." Tom shook his head. "It's not that simple." "Then make it simple." He stared at me for a long time. Then quietly he said, "Tomorrow, June 12th, he's bringing Daniel to the docks for the exchange." "What exchange?" "You for him." The room tilted. "He wants me." Tom nodded. "Robert made a promise he couldn't keep. You're the payment now." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Tom said, barely above a whisper, "I'll help you, but when it's done, we're both dead. You understand that, right?" I looked him in the eye. I stopped being afraid of dying the moment I thought my son was gone. He swallowed hard. "Then we have one night to prepare." When he left, I sat there, staring at the clock. Each tick echoed like a countdown. I picked up the locket again, tracing the word debt with my thumb. Then I looked at Daniel's photo, his smile, his innocence. If this was the cost of love, then I would pay it in full. No hesitation, no fear, just a mother ready to walk into the fire. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, the images replayed, the flash drive, the cabin, Tom's confession, Robert's shaking voice in that final video. The ghosts of everyone I'd ever loved were now connected by one name, Crane. But as the night deepened, something else began to surface. A memory. One I had buried so far down it only returned now, when I had nothing left to lose. When Daniel was 12, he once asked me, "Mom, why don't we ever visit Uncle Tom on weekends anymore?" I'd laughed and told him, "Because your uncle has a life of his own." But the truth was uglier. Robert and I had stopped seeing Tom because of a fight I never understood. That night, I'd woken to the sound of shouting outside our house. "Robert, you owe me," Tom had yelled. "You think Crane just going to forget?" Robert's voice had been low, almost pleading. "You weren't supposed to tell him where we lived." I remembered pulling the curtain back just enough to see them. Two brothers, one terrified, one angry enough to kill. Tom had shoved Robert against the car. "Crane wants the interest, Rob, not my problem if you can't pay." Robert had shouted back, "I'll find another way." That was the night Robert disappeared for 2 days. When he came back, his knuckles were split open, his clothes smelled of gasoline, and his eyes looked like he'd stared straight into hell. He never told me what happened. He just whispered, "If anything ever happens to me, keep Daniel away from Tom." And I didn't listen. If you've ever ignored a warning because you wanted to believe in someone's goodness, because love blinded you more than hate ever could, then you'll understand why this memory still feels like a wound. Like, subscribe, and share. Because memory isn't nostalgia, sometimes it's punishment. As dawn broke, the light filtering through my window hit the old locket still on the table. The word debt seemed to glimmer faintly, as if taunting me. Debt, bloodline, June 12th. I opened my notebook and began writing everything down. The timelines, the clues, the faces, the lies. Every pattern, every connection, every betrayal. When I finished, I realized something chilling. Didn't just own debts, he created them. He'd found ways to chain families together across generations. One man would borrow, the next would pay. And when one bloodline ended, he'd move to the next, keeping power alive by ensuring guilt never died. Robert hadn't been the first. Daniel wouldn't be the last. Unless I stopped it. At noon, my phone buzzed again, a message this time. No name, no number. "Tonight, midnight, Pier 7, come alone." Attached was a photo. Daniel tied to a chair, his head down, a bruise along his jaw. Alive. I dropped the phone, the world tilting beneath me. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, but my mind had never been clearer. Tom had said the exchange was at the docks. Crane had just confirmed it. But the word alone wasn't just an order, it was a trap. I spent the rest of the afternoon preparing. I packed a small bag, Robert's old lighter, my phone, the flash drive, and one of the Queen of Hearts cards. If Crane wanted to play games, I'd bring the deck. As the sun began to set, I sat by the window and watched the sky burn orange and red, colors that looked too much like endings. I thought about Daniel as a child, his laughter echoing through this same room. And I whispered, "Hold on, baby, just one more night." But beneath the resolve, another thought whispered louder. What if this wasn't about saving him anymore? What if it was about ending everything once and for all? Because maybe Robert had been right all along. Maybe debts like these didn't end with mercy. They ended with blood. By sunset, the city was drowning in gold and shadow. The streets looked like a painting of endings, too beautiful, too fragile to be real. I stood by the window, phone in hand, staring at that single photo of Daniel tied to a chair. The bruise, the fear in his eyes, the blood on his lip. Alive but broken. Because of me. Because of all of us. I had 12 hours until midnight. If you've ever had to step into hell just to save someone you love, if you've ever looked at fear and said, "I'm coming anyway," then you'll understand this part. Like, subscribe, share. Because this isn't just a story, it's a confession. I started with the one thing that had haunted me since the beginning, the Queen and King of Hearts cards. Why cards? Why those cards? I laid them side by side on the table under the lamp. Then I noticed something I'd missed before. The backs weren't identical. Each had tiny golden lines, patterns that, when connected, formed a faint outline of something familiar. A crown. And beneath it, faint letters I could barely make out, Crane Holdings. I felt sick. These weren't just playing cards, they were calling cards. Every family Crane destroyed probably received their own deck. He turned his victims into part of his empire's story. And I was next. But there was something else, too. When I turned the King of Hearts over, I noticed a small code written in Daniel's handwriting along the edge. 712 AC. June 12th, today's date. And AC, it couldn't mean air conditioning. Then it hit me, abandoned complex. The old waterfront warehouse, Pier 7. The mating place. I had my confirmation. Tom texted me at 8:43 p.m. Meet me an hour early. Parking lot by the cannery. Don't tell anyone. Bring everything. I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't trust him, but I couldn't afford not to. I grabbed my bag, the locket, and one of Robert's old revolvers from the safe. It hadn't been fired in years, but the weight of it in my hand felt like purpose. The drive to the waterfront was eerily calm. No cars, no people, just the hum of streetlights flickering over the empty docks. When I pulled into the cannery lot, Tom was already there, leaning against his truck, smoking. He looked older in the sodium glow, gray creeping into his beard, eyes sunken from guilt or exhaustion. Maybe both. You came, he said quietly. Of course I did. He nodded, flicking away his cigarette. Crane's men will be watching. You'll need to stay behind me when we get inside. I studied him. Why help me now? He hesitated. Because Robert was my brother and because Daniel's a good kid, he doesn't deserve this. Neither did Robert, I said softly. Tom's eyes dropped. No, he didn't. We drove separately to Pier 7. The warehouse loomed over the docks like a sleeping beast, its metal ribs rusted, windows shattered, the air thick with the smell of salt and diesel. The moon hung above it like a pale witness. Tom met me by the entrance, his voice low. Once we're in, follow my lead. Don't speak unless Crane asks you to. He likes to. Control, I finished. He gave a grim smile. You learn fast. Inside, the air was heavy, humming faintly with machinery somewhere in the distance. Footsteps echoed before I even saw them. 3 men stepping out of the shadows, their faces obscured, their presence unmistakable. And behind them, emerging slowly into the light, was a man in a tailored black suit. Slick hair, sharp eyes, a smile that didn't reach them. Crane. So, he said, voice smooth as silk, the famous Turner. I felt Tom tense beside me. Crane looked at me like I was a curiosity he'd ordered years ago and forgotten about. I have to admit, you're a brave woman. Your husband tried to play hero too. Didn't work out for him. My chest tightened. Where's my son? Crane smiled. You'll see him soon, but first we need to discuss the terms. He motioned toward a chair in the center of the room. Please sit. I didn't move. I'm not here for games. He chuckled softly. Games, no business. He snapped his fingers, and one of his men wheeled out a small metal case. Inside, stacked neatly, were bundles of cash, hundreds of thousands. Your husband owed me this, Crane said, but I'm a reasonable man, I believe in family, so I'm offering you a choice. He leaned forward. You take his place and your son walks free. The words sliced through me like glass. Tom stepped forward. Crane, that wasn't the deal. Crane's hand went up. The deal changes when people start snooping in my warehouses. He turned to me again, eyes gleaming. So what's it going to be, Mrs. Turner, you or him? The silence stretched. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. And then, from behind a stack of crates, a voice cracked the air. Don't you dare, Mom. Daniel. He stumbled into the light, bruised, bleeding, but alive. 2 men grabbed him by the arms, forcing him to his knees. Daniel, I started forward, but Crane raised a hand. Stay where you are. He smiled like a man who already knew how this would end. Midnight, you've got until midnight to decide. The echo of Crane's voice hung in the air long after he left the room. You or him. Those 3 words looped in my head like a curse. Daniel was kneeling on the cold concrete floor, his hands tied, his face swollen but his eyes alive. Alive and terrified. And yet beneath all that fear I saw something else, defiance. The same defiance Robert had the night he refused to give in to Crane. But I was Robert, and I wasn't going to die for someone else's game. If you've ever faced a moment where your love and your survival stood on opposite sides of the same choice, you'll understand what I felt right then. Like, subscribe, and share, because this isn't courage. This is desperation turned into strategy. When the guards dragged Daniel away again, Tom leaned in close and whispered, We can't win this head-on. Crane's got 10 men watching every door. Then we don't fight him head-on, I said. We outplay him. I reached into my bag and handed him the flash drive. Robert left this, whatever on it, it's what Crane's afraid of. Tom hesitated, and if it's not enough, then we burn everything down. We left the warehouse quietly under the pretense of thinking over the deal. Crane didn't stop us, he didn't have to, he knew I'd come back, he thought he had me cornered. But Robert had taught me something Crane never learned. Corner a desperate mother and she becomes a weapon. Back at the car, Tom connected the flash drive to his laptop. Lines of encrypted code filled the screen, dozens of files labeled with numbers and names. He scrolled through until he found one that froze us both. Turner Holdings ledger unlisted. I leaned in, that's Robert's company. Tom's voice was hoarse. No, it's Crane's. Robert built it for him to launder money, every property, every fake loan under your family's name. My hands went numb, so the debt wasn't about money. Tom nodded slowly. It was about control. Crane used Robert's reputation to move his dirty funds. That's why he couldn't just kill him. He needed him alive to sign to legitimize everything. And after Robert died, Tom met my eyes. He needed you. The room spun. Every moment, every strange phone call, every forged signature. It all made sense. I had become the next signature in Crane's empire. And Daniel was next in line. But the ledger, if I could leak it, was proof enough to destroy Crane completely. Dozens of companies, government officials, even judges were on it. I looked at Tom. How many people would he kill to keep this buried? Tom sighed, everyone, including me. The clock read 10:07 p.m., less than 2 hours to midnight. I grabbed a piece of paper and began to write a letter, a confession, a map, and a message for Daniel if I didn't make it back. When I finished, I sealed it inside Robert's old locket and slipped it into my coat pocket. Tom watched quietly. You're really going through with this, aren't you? I looked up. I've been living in fear for too long. Tonight it ends. He frowned. You're talking like you're not coming back. I smiled weakly. I'm not planning to, but plans don't mean much anymore. At 11:00, I told Tom to drive me back to Pier 7. He tried to argue, but I cut him off. You're not coming inside. You'll be outside with the car. If I'm not out by midnight, you go straight to the police with that drive. He hesitated, jaw tight. Promise me, Tom. He exhaled shakily. I promise. As the warehouse came into view again, I could feel the air change. It was colder, heavier, like the sea itself knew what was about to happen. The moon was high now, lighting up the water in streaks of silver. Somewhere inside, Daniel was waiting. I checked the revolver one last time. Then, before stepping out, I whispered, Robert, if you're out there, guide me. Inside, Crane was waiting, calm and collected, a serpent dressed in silk. You came back, he said. I admire loyalty. I came to end this, I said, voice steady. He laughed softly. End? No, there are only beginnings here. You join me and you get everything you lost. Money, power, protection. You could even have your son back as my partner. I stared at him. You're offering me my son's soul as payment. He smirked. I'm offering you survival. I took a slow step forward. I've already survived worse. And with that, I tossed the flash drive at his feet. He raised an eyebrow. What's this? Insurance, I said. That's the full ledger of every transaction under Turner Holdings. Names, accounts, dates, yours included. For the first time, the mask slipped. Crane's jaw tightened. You wouldn't dare. I smiled coldly. It's already uploaded. His face went pale. You're lying. Maybe, maybe not, but you'll have to let me walk out to find out. He turned to his men. Find her phone now. As they lunged forward, the first explosion shook the ground. Flames erupted from the side of the warehouse, Tom's doing. Panic spread like wildfire. I drew the revolver and aimed at Crane. The deal's off. He sneered, You think you can kill me? No, I said, I think I can distract you. Then I pulled the trigger. The sound of the gunshot shattered the world. Crane staggered backward, clutching his shoulder, his silk suit now stained dark red. For one suspended moment, everyone froze, the guards, the smoke, even time itself. Then chaos erupted. Men shouted, gunfire cracked, and flames tore through the old wooden beams like hungry teeth. The warehouse that had been a tomb of secrets was now an inferno of reckoning. I didn't wait to see if Crane fell. I ran. If you've ever had to move through chaos while your heart begged you to look back. If you've ever fought your way through fire just to reach the one person who still made life worth living, then you'll understand this. Like, subscribe, share. Because survival isn't bravery, it's love wearing armor. Smoke choked the air as I pushed deeper into the burning maze of crates. Daniel, I screamed. Mom, his voice faint, broken, came from the far side of the warehouse. I followed it, coughing, squinting through the haze until I saw him tied to a chair, flames crawling up a curtain behind him. I sliced through the rope with the small blade I kept in my boot. His wrists were raw, bleeding, but his eyes lit up the second he saw me. Mom, you shouldn't have come. I laughed, tears mixing with ash, and let Crane win, not a chance. We ran toward the side exit, dodging falling debris and collapsing beams. Behind us, I could hear Crane shouting orders, his voice still strong despite the wound. Stop them, bring me the drive. When we reached the loading dock, Tom's truck was waiting, engine roaring, headlights cutting through the smoke. He threw open the passenger door, get in. I shoved Daniel inside and turned back just in time to see Crane limping out of the fire, gun raised. The muzzle flashed. Pain ripped through my arm, hot and sharp. I fell against the truck. Mom, Daniel screamed. Go, I yelled, shoving him toward Tom. Drive. But Tom didn't move. He grabbed his shotgun from the seat and stepped out. You're not dying tonight. The two men faced each other through the chaos, Crane bleeding, Tom grim, the air thick with heat and hatred. Crane smirked, blood dripping down his sleeve. You think you're the hero here, brother? You were always the weak one. Tom's jaw clenched. No, the weak one is the man who hides behind fear. Before Crane could answer, Tom fired. The blast echoed over the crashing waves. Crane dropped, his gun skidding across the ground. The king had fallen. Tom rushed to my side, helping me into the truck. You okay? I've had worse, I said through clenched teeth. Let's go before his men recover. As we sped away, the burning warehouse shrank in the mirror, a collapsing monument to decades of lies. Daniel held my hand the whole ride back, his grip trembling. Mom, I thought I lost you. I smiled weakly. You can't get rid of me that easily. He laughed, but the sound broke halfway through, a mix of relief and disbelief. We reached Tom's cabin near dawn. The horizon glowed faintly, a promise of a day we weren't supposed to see. Tom parked near the back and helped me inside. Daniel cleaned the wound in my arm as best he could. His hands shook. You need a hospital, he whispered. We can't, Tom said. Crane's people will be looking. We need to disappear for a while. I looked up at him. You killed him. Tom nodded. Yeah, and they'll come for me now. There was something heavy in his eyes, not fear, not regret, just finality. After Daniel fell asleep, Tom and I sat outside under the fading stars. The sea air was cool, and for the first time in years I could breathe. You saved us, I said quietly. He shook his head. No, I just delayed what was coming. I frowned. What do you mean? He looked out toward the horizon. Crane wasn't just one man, he was a network, politicians, businessmen, enforcers. The moment that Ledger goes public, all hell will break loose. You need to be ready. I realized what he was saying, that he didn't expect to survive what came next. Tom, he smiled sadly. Promise me one thing, if I don't make it, tell Daniel the truth about me, all of it. Not the good parts, not the lies, the truth. I will. As the sun rose, painting the sky gold and red, I finally allowed myself to exhale. The fire was behind us, Crane was dead, the ledger existed. But peace was still far away. I turned to Tom, who stood with his hands in his pockets, watching the sunrise like a man saying goodbye. What happens now? I asked. He didn't look at me. Now we prepare for the ones who come after him. Morning crept in like a lie, quiet, golden, and undeserved. The world outside the cabin was still and fragile, as if nature itself held its breath after the night of fire. Tom brewed coffee in silence, his movements stiff. Daniel slept on the couch, his body curled up under an old wool blanket, exhaustion carving lines into his young face. But I didn't sleep. I couldn't, because every time I closed my eyes, I saw Crane's face. Bleeding, smiling, alive. If you've ever felt that the worst monster in your life refused to die, if you've ever sensed that peace was just another form of denial, you'll understand what I'm about to say. Like, subscribe, comment, share. Because sometimes the real story begins after the fire. I stepped outside into the damp air, the smell of burnt salt and ash still clinging to the breeze. For a few seconds, I thought I saw movement down the road, a flicker of a dark coat disappearing behind the trees. When I blinked, it was gone. Maybe my mind was playing tricks. Or maybe the fire hadn't finished what I thought it did. By noon, Daniel woke up pale and quiet. He tried to pretend everything was normal, helped Tom fix the generator, made sandwiches, but I could see the tremor in his hands. At one point, he looked up at me and whispered, "Mom, what happens now?" I smiled softly. Now we start over. He nodded, but there was doubt in his eyes. You think it's that easy? No, I admitted, but it's necessary. Tom came in from outside, wiping grease off his hands. Phone lines cut, he said. Someone been here. I froze. What? Tracks around the back, boot prints, fresh ones. My stomach dropped. It's Crane's men. Tom nodded grimly, or someone worse. An hour later, a black SUV appeared at the edge of the dirt road. It didn't approach, just idled there, engine humming softly. I grabbed the revolver and stood by the window. Tom loaded his shotgun. After a few tense minutes, a man stepped out of the SUV. He wasn't one of Crane's men. He was older, dressed in a dark coat, with slicked-back silver hair and an expression too calm for comfort. He held up his hands as if approaching an animal he didn't want to startle. "Mrs. Turner," he called out, "my name is Agent Caldwell. I'm with the Department of Organized Crime." Tom muttered, "Government spook." I narrowed my eyes. "Prove it." He pulled out a badge, flashed it once, then tucked it back. "I'm not here to arrest you," he said. "I'm here because you made a very big mess." We let him in, though Tom kept his gun close. Caldwell glanced around the small cabin, the cracked walls, the dishes in the sink, Daniel's half-eaten sandwich on the table. "You've been busy," he said. "Pier 7, the fire, the missing ledger, impressive." "You mean dangerous," I said flatly. He smiled faintly. "Both. You exposed one of the most powerful laundering networks in the country, but that means you've made enemies in very high places." I crossed my arms. "Crane's dead." Caldwell's smile vanished. "Is he?" The air turned colder. "What do you mean, is he?" Caldwell looked directly at me. His body wasn't found, and two of his men were seen leaving the docks before the explosion. Since then, we've intercepted communications, someone calling themselves the King. The blood drained from my face. Tom swore under his breath. "He's alive." Caldwell leaned forward. "I don't think he'll come for you right away. He's regrouping. But when he does, he won't come for revenge. He'll come for the ledger." Tom frowned. "We don't have it anymore." Caldwell smirked. "No, then why are his men still tracking you?" Daniel looked between us, fear creeping back into his expression. "Mom," he whispered, "what if he finds us?" I took his hand. "Then he'll learn what happens when you corner a Turner again." After Caldwell left, Tom paced by the window, restless. "You believe him?" "Yes," I said. "Crane was too arrogant to die quietly." Tom stopped packing and looked at me. "Then we finish this. We don't hide, we go after him before he comes for us." I nodded slowly. "We'll need help." He gave a half smile. "I know people, ex-cops, journalists, a few who owe me favors." "And the ledger." He glanced at me, a flicker of guilt in his eyes. "I made a copy." I blinked. "You what?" "Insurance," he said. "If Crane's still alive, he'll want proof that his empire's not gone. This gives us leverage." I wanted to be angry, but he wasn't wrong. In this world, secrets were currency, and we had the only bank left standing. That night, as Daniel slept again, I stood by the window watching the tree line. Somewhere out there in the darkness, I felt it, eyes watching. Crane was alive. And this time, he wasn't just a criminal. He was a ghost with an army. 3 days passed before the storm broke. The first sign was silence. No birds, no wind, just an unnatural stillness outside the cabin that made my skin crawl. The second was the smell, gasoline. And the third was the sound. Engines. Not one. Several. Tom was the first to react. He grabbed his shotgun, motioning for me to wake Daniel quietly. I crept to the couch and shook him gently. "Daniel, honey, it's time. Remember what we practiced." His eyes shot open, fear instantly replacing sleep. He found us. I nodded once. "Go through the back to the ravine. Stay low, don't stop until you hear my voice." He hesitated, tears welling in his eyes. "What about you?" I forced a smile. "I'll be right behind you." If you've ever stood between your child and the thing that wants to destroy them. If you've ever known that love sometimes means turning yourself into a shield. Then you'll understand this. Like, subscribe, comment, and share. Because sometimes survival isn't about running. It's about standing still when everyone else flees. Tom peered through the blinds. 3 SUVs, he whispered. Armed, black jackets, Crane's men. My pulse hammered. "We can't outrun them." He shook his head. "No, but we can make them bleed first." He handed me a revolver and 2 spare rounds. "You still remember how to aim." I smirked grimly. "Better than I remember how to forgive." The men fanned out through the clearing, weapons drawn. They moved like a small army, silent and surgical. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of one of them, the man with the scar across his cheek. I recognized him instantly. He'd been Crane's driver the night of the fire. They hadn't just found us, they followed us from the docks. Tom whispered, "We've got one shot at this. Take out the tires of the lead car, I'll draw their fire." Before I could argue, he burst through the front door, firing 2 rounds. Bullets whizzed back instantly, slamming into the porch beams. "Tom," I screamed, firing through the side window. One tire exploded and the SUV skidded sideways. Smoke filled the air again, not from fire this time, but from gunpowder and vengeance. Tom ducked behind the truck, shouting, "Go, take Daniel and run." But it was already too late. A flash of movement from the tree line, a rifle. The shot hit Tom square in the chest. I froze. For a moment, I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Tom staggered, his shotgun slipping from his hand as he fell to his knees. "No." I ran to him, ignoring the bullets tearing through the air. I dropped beside him, grabbing his face. He coughed, blood pooling at the corner of his mouth. You finish it." "Tom plays." He smiled faintly. "Robert was right about you, stronger than both of us." His eyes fluttered shut. And just like that, he was gone. Rage burned through the grief. Hot, blinding, absolute. I picked up Tom's shotgun and turned toward the trees. The first man who stepped out met a bullet between the eyes. Then another, and another. Each shot was louder than thunder. Each pull of the trigger erased a piece of the fear that had ruled my life. By the time my ammunition ran out, the clearing was littered with bodies, silent, still, and finally powerless. The last man alive dropped his gun and raised his hands. "Please," he begged, "I was just following orders." I aimed at him. "Where Crane?" He swallowed hard. He's coming himself." My finger tightened on the trigger. "When?" "Tonight." I fired. The echo of that shot rolled through the forest like judgment itself. I stumbled back into the cabin, chest heaving, the world spinning. Tom's body lay still near the porch, his eyes open, fixed on the sky. Daniel was gone. He'd made it to the ravine. Good. I sank to the floor, clutching the shotgun, my hands trembling from pain and adrenaline. Crane was coming. Not his men. Not his empire. Him. And when he did, I would be ready. Night fell heavy, the air thick with storm clouds. I dragged Tom's body inside, covered him with a blanket, and whispered, "I'll finish it, I promise." Then I sat by the window, staring into the dark. Somewhere out there, the devil was on his way home. And this time, I wasn't the frightened widow anymore. I was the reckoning he created. Midnight came like a promise written in smoke. The wind howled through the broken trees, carrying whispers from the fire we'd left behind. I sat by the window, the revolver across my lap, Tom's blood still under my nails. Every sound outside made my heart jump. Every shadow felt like a ghost returning for revenge. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Fear had burned away with the rest of my old life. If you've ever reached the point where grief becomes clarity, when losing everything strips you down to who you really are, you'll understand this moment. Like, subscribe, and share if you've ever had to become your own armor. The first lightning flash revealed him. Crane. He stepped out of the darkness like a nightmare made flesh. No bodyguards this time. No entourage. Just him, pale and somehow more alive than ever. He walked toward the cabin with the calm arrogance of a man who believed himself untouchable. When he reached the porch, he stopped, hands raised, rain dripping from his hair. "May I come in?" he asked, his voice steady. I didn't move. "You're already in hell, Crane. Might as well make yourself comfortable." He smiled, Turner, fireproof as ever. He stepped inside, dripping water onto the floorboards. The candlelight flickered across his face, revealing a deep scar on his neck, proof that my bullet had come close. "You should finish the job," he said softly. "I thought I did." He laughed low and hollow. "You don't kill men like me, you just delay us." I stood slowly, the gun in my hand steady. "Then let's end the delay." He spread his arms. "Shoot me then, but before you do, don't you want to know what your husband was really doing for me?" I froze. "What are you talking about?" He tilted his head. "Robert wasn't a victim, he was a partner. Every shell company, every account, he built them with me. You were the front, the clean name, the perfect wife with perfect ignorance." My stomach twisted. You're lying. He smiled. MI check the ledger, page 74. I hesitated, then pulled out the copy Tom had made. The folder was damp from the rain, the papers smudged. My eyes scanned the list of names until I saw it. Turner Family Holdings, executive partner, Robert Turner, 50%. My eyes weakened. No, it couldn't be. Crane stepped closer. He wasn't trying to protect you, he was trying to protect himself. The room spun. Robert, my Robert, had built this empire with the devil. All those years I'd thought he was the good man, the victim of greed. All those tears I'd shed for him. And suddenly, I didn't know who I was mourning anymore. Crane leaned closer, his voice low. He tried to leave, of course, said he couldn't live with the guilt, so I made sure his heart stopped before his courage did. The words hit harder than any bullet. You killed him. Crane's smile widened. I gave him peace. I fired. The shot grazed his cheek, blood mixing with rainwater. He didn't flinch, just laughed. There she is, the real. Do you feel better now? I raised the gun again, but he stepped closer, daring me. Go on, but if you kill me, the rest of them will come and you'll never know where the last account is hidden, the one in your name. That stopped me. My name? What account? He smiled, slow and poisonous. The one Robert opened for you, the one holding everything you thought he left for your son. That's the only thing keeping my associates from erasing you completely. You kill me and it disappears. I gritted my teeth. You expect me to believe that? He leaned in, whispering, you already do. I lowered the gun slightly. Not out of mercy, out of calculation. Crane mistook it for weakness and reached into his coat. But I was faster. Another shot, this time straight to the chest. He stumbled backward, crashing into the table, gasping. Why you? He wheezed. I walked toward him slowly. You talk too much. He fell to his knees, eyes wide, blood spreading across his shirt. You don't know what you've done. Then he collapsed, his body hitting the floor with a dull thud. For a long moment, there was only the sound of rain and my own ragged breathing. Then I felt something else, peace. Not joy, not relief, just peace. The kind that comes when the last ghost finally stops whispering. I stepped outside into the storm. The rain soaked through my clothes, washing away blood and ash alike. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled like applause. Daniel appeared at the edge of the woods, eyes wide when he saw me. He ran to me, tears streaming down his face. Mom. I dropped the gun and pulled him into my arms. It's over, I whispered. It's finally over. But even as I said it, I knew it was. Because the dead don't die easily in a world built on secrets. The storm outside had passed, but inside me it was only beginning. Crane's body lay motionless on the floor, blood pooling around the edges of the worn rug. Daniel stood frozen near the doorway, his chest rising and falling too fast. Mom, he whispered, what did you do? I turned to him slowly, every breath feeling like glass in my lungs. I ended it. But even as I said it, I could feel that I hadn't, not really. If you've ever thought you reached the end of your pain, only to realize the truth was waiting behind one more locked door. You'll understand this. Like, subscribe, and share because this is where the truth finally shows its face. I knelt beside Crane's body, my mind replaying every word he'd said. Robert wasn't a victim, he was a partner. I wanted to erase it, to burn it, to never hear it again. But something inside me, something colder and sharper, whispered check. I searched Crane's pockets. His phone was still there, half-cracked, still buzzing from notifications. When I unlocked it, a single message thread glowed on the screen. Sender RT. The last message read. Make sure she believes the lie, it's the only way out. I blinked, my brain refusing to connect the initials. RT. Robert Turner. No. I scrolled further up, fingers trembling. Crane, she'll find out eventually. RT, then make it believable. She needs to hate me or she'll never let go. Crane, you're playing with fire. RT, I'm already burned. My breath hitched. Robert was alive. I stumbled backward, phone still in my hand. Daniel caught me before I fell. Mom, what is it? I looked at him, my vision blurring with tears. He's alive, Daniel, your father, he's alive. Daniel froze. What? That's not possible. I saw the coffin, the body. I shook my head violently. It was staged. Crane helped him disappear. It was all part of his deal. Tom's voice echoed in my head. Crane wasn't just one man, he was a network. Robert hadn't been Crane's victim. He'd been his partner. And now his ghost had come back to finish what he started. I grabbed my phone and dialed the last number in Crane's call log, the one saved under RT. It rang twice before a voice answered. My heart stopped. It was him. I couldn't breathe. Robert. A long silence, then quietly, almost tenderly. I told you not to dig. I felt my throat tighten. You let me mourn you for years. You let Daniel think his father was dead. I had to, he said softly. Crane owned everything. If I'd stayed, he would destroyed you both. I almost laughed, a broken, bitter sound. You call this protection? You made me live in hell. He sighed. It was supposed to end tonight. Crane's dead, isn't he? Yes, I whispered. Then it's done, he said. You can start over now. Take Daniel and leave the country. The accounts will transfer to your name in the morning. I stared at the phone, shaking. You think you can erase this with money, with lies? No, my voice cracked, but I didn't care. You don't get to call this love. You used us, you used me. Silence. Then quietly he said, you were always the strongest one. That's why I loved you. The line went dead. I stood there for what felt like hours, the storm echoing his words in my mind. He was alive, but he wasn't mine anymore. He never had been. And suddenly I understood the real message Crane had left behind, the one I'd been too blind to see. The debt wasn't money. It was truth. Every lie, every deal, every act of love twisted by greed, that was the inheritance our family carried. Daniel broke the silence. What do we do now, Mom? I looked at him, the last good thing in this world of ghosts and fire, and smiled faintly. We end it for good. How? He asked, his voice trembling. I held up Crane's phone, by making the truth public, every name, every file, every dirty dollar. Daniel swallowed hard. If we do that, they'll come for us. I met his eyes. Let them, I'm done running. As I spoke, thunder rumbled again, not distant this time, but close. The rain had started to fall harder, washing away the blood by the doorway. For the first time in years, I felt something like freedom. Not peace, not forgiveness, but freedom. The kind that comes when you stop being afraid of what's left to lose. By dawn, the world had changed. Not the city, not the skyline, not the world people could see, but mine. The rain had washed away the blood from the floorboards. The storm clouds had scattered into soft streaks of gray, and for the first time in years, I could hear birds again. But inside me, something else was breaking, quietly, painfully, like a bone finally healing after being set wrong for too long. Robert was alive. Tom was dead. Crane was gone. And I was still here. If you've ever had to rebuild yourself from the ashes of other people's lies, if you've ever had to learn how to breathe again after realizing love can wound as much as it saves, you'll understand this part. Like, subscribe, and share. Because healing doesn't mean forgetting, it means forgiving yourself for believing. Daniel sat at the kitchen table, his eyes hollow from sleeplessness. He was scrolling through the files on Crane's phone, the ledger, the accounts, the proof. Each document was a confession, each name a scar. He looked up at me. If we release this, people will die, Mom. These aren't just criminals. There are politicians, judges, police officers. I know, I said, but that's why we have to. He clenched his fists. You think truth fixes things, it just destroys people. I walked over and put a hand on his shoulder. Sometimes destruction is the only way to build something honest. He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, then we do it your way. We spent hours compiling the evidence, every transfer, every bribe, every hidden document from Crane's empire. I uploaded them to every major news outlet, encrypted under one name. The Turner Files. By the time the sun rose high, the world was already burning again, this time with truth. Headlines exploded across every screen. Billionaire syndicate exposed in multi-state corruption scandal. Anonymous source leaks financial crimes of elite network. And buried deep within those reports was one sentence that made me stop breathing. Authorities are searching for Robert Turner, the presumed dead financier linked to Crane Holdings. He was running again. But not from me. From what he'd created. Daniel slammed the laptop shut, tears streaming down his face. He deserves to pay, Mom, for everything. I looked at him, really looked at him. He wasn't the scared boy I'd tried to protect anymore. He was his father's son and his mother's resolve bound into one. No, I said gently, he deserves to live with it, that's worse. Daniel frowned, you're letting him go. I'm letting me go. We buried Tom that afternoon behind the cabin, near the tree line overlooking the water. The earth was still damp from the storm, the air heavy with salt and grief. Daniel helped me lower the wooden cross we'd carved into place. I should thanked him, Daniel whispered. He knew, I said softly. Tom always knew what he meant to us. We stood in silence for a while, the sound of the waves crashing softly below. Then Daniel said, do you think Dad ever loved us, like really loved us? I swallowed hard, yes, but his love came with conditions, mine doesn't. He nodded, wiping his eyes, then maybe that's enough. That night I sat by the fire, watching the flames curl around the edges of the old ledger. I'd kept one copy, not to use, not to expose again, but to remember. To remind myself what silence costs. As the paper turned to ash, I whispered a final goodbye. Robert Turner, may you finally face yourself. Daniel came to sit beside me, his head resting on my shoulder. Mom. Yes, sweetheart. He smiled faintly, what now? I looked into the flames. Now we start over, no lies, no debts, just us. In the quiet that followed, I realized something profound. Healing wasn't loud. It didn't look like closure or feel like victory. It was slow, quiet, and invisible, like the tide reshaping the shore after a storm. The past would always exist, but it no longer owned me. Somewhere out there, Robert was reading the news. Maybe he was angry, maybe he was proud. Maybe, for the first time in his life, he understood the difference between power and peace. But for me, for us, the war was finally over. The days that followed felt strange, almost too calm. The air was clean again, the nights were quiet, and the cabin that once held so much grief had started to feel like a sanctuary instead of a prison. Daniel and I spent our mornings repairing what the storm had broken, the windows, the porch railing, even the small vegetable garden that had long gone untended. It was strange how healing didn't arrive with triumph or applause. It arrived in small, ordinary things: the sound of Daniel's laughter, the scent of rain-soaked wood, the stillness of mornings that didn't begin with fear. If you've ever had to rebuild after devastation, if you've ever found redemption not in revenge but in quiet survival, then you'll understand this. Like, subscribe, and share. Because sometimes redemption isn't about being forgiven, it's about forgiving yourself enough to keep living. We sold the cabin after a few weeks. Not because it haunted us, but because it belonged to a version of us that no longer existed. With the money we had left and what little the government hadn't frozen from the exposed accounts, we moved to a small coastal town 2 states away. The ocean there was gentler. No towering cliffs or crashing waves, just slow tides and endless horizons like the world itself was exhaling. I found work in a small library, cataloging old books and repairing bindings. Daniel took night classes at a community college nearby, studying journalism of all things. When I asked him why, he said, because truth should belong to someone who's not afraid of it anymore. That made me smile and ache all at once. One morning, about 6 months after the fire, I received a letter. It was postmarked from Switzerland, written in a handwriting I could never forget. Roberts. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside, a single page. I've seen what you did, you were always the better one. The truth needed to come out, and maybe I needed to lose everything to understand what I'd become. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I'm done running. Tell Daniel I'm proud of him. Tell him he was the one thing I did right. Oh, Robert. There was no return address. No clue where he was. Just his signature, neat, deliberate, and final. I sat on the porch for hours, the letter in my lap, the wind playing softly through the pages of my book. Daniel came home from class and saw me staring out at the water. Another ghost, he asked gently. I smiled faintly, maybe one that's learning how to rest. He sat beside me, reading the letter silently. When he finished, he folded it neatly and handed it back. Do you believe him? He asked. I thought about it, about everything, the love, the lies, the fire, the blood. I believe, I said finally, that he means it today, and that's enough. That night, I burned the letter. Not out of anger, but release. The paper curled and blackened, the smoke carrying his words into the sky like a prayer. For the first time in years, I slept without dreams. Weeks turned into months, and slowly the story of the Turner family faded from the headlines. New scandals replaced ours. New names filled the ledgers of corruption. The world moved on, and so did we. Daniel graduated the following spring. When he walked across that stage, his name was called not as the son of a criminal, but as Daniel Turner, investigative journalist. When he looked out into the audience, I was there, clapping, crying, and finally free. Redemption didn't come from the world forgiving us. It came from the simple truth that we'd stopped hiding from who we were. We were survivors, imperfect and unashamed. And sometimes that's the bravest thing a person can be. Years passed quietly. The chaos that once consumed our lives became a distant echo, fading beneath the steady rhythm of peace. The sea outside our little home sang the same song every morning, soft waves, patient tides, and wind that carried the smell of salt and forgiveness. Daniel built a life for himself. He worked for a local newspaper, exposing corruption with the kind of truth that didn't burn, it healed. And I had finally learned the art of silence. Not the silence of fear or grief, but the kind that feels like breathing after drowning. If you've ever rebuilt your life from the ruins of what you lost, if you've ever dared to believe that peace can last, you'll understand this part. Like, subscribe, and share. Because sometimes reconnection isn't finding others again, it's finding yourself. It happened one late afternoon, years later. I was leaving the library when I saw him. Older, thinner, but unmistakably him. Robert. He stood across the street, wearing a gray coat and a face that carried both guilt and gentleness. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. I didn't run. I didn't shout. I just crossed the road slowly until we were standing a few feet apart. I wasn't sure you'd want to see me, he said softly. I wasn't sure I would either, I replied. He gave a small, broken smile. You look at peace. I am. We walked along the pier together, the one overlooking the calm, forgiving sea. He told me about his years in hiding, how he'd turned himself in to the Swiss authorities under a false name, giving up millions to dismantle what was left of Crane's network. How he'd worked quietly with investigators to bring down others who still thrived on that corruption. I can't undo what I did, he said, his voice barely above the wind, but I can make sure no one else pays for it. I looked at him, at the man I had once loved more than anything and hated just as much. You're trying to fix what's left of your soul, I said. He nodded, and maybe what's left of ours. We sat at a bench near the edge of the pier. The waves below us lapped against the posts, the same way they had years ago when he proposed to me on a stormy night. I read Daniel's articles, he said quietly. He's good, better than I ever was. He's honest, I said. That's what makes him better. Robert smiled faintly. He reminds me of you. I shook my head. No, Robert, he's who we could been. There was a pause, long, heavy, but not cruel. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small box. I kept this, he said. Inside was my old wedding ring, the one I'd thrown into the ocean after his funeral. My breath caught. How? He smiled faintly. It washed up months later. Maybe the sea was kinder to me than I deserved. I stared at it, the symbol of everything that was once beautiful and broken. Then I closed the box and handed it back. It belongs in the past, I said, where it can't hurt anyone anymore. Robert nodded, eyes glistening. You're right. We sat there in silence for a while, watching the sunset paint the sky gold and crimson. There were no apologies left to give. No forgiveness to ask for. Just two people who had finally learned the truth about themselves, that love doesn't always survive, but sometimes it evolves. When he finally stood, I did too. He took a step back, his voice trembling slightly. Goodbye. I smiled softly. Goodbye, Robert. And as he walked away, I felt no anger. No sadness. Just closure. The kind that doesn't come from answers, but from knowing you no longer need them. That night when I told Daniel, he listened quietly, his hand tightening around mine. I'm glad you saw him, he said. You deserved that. I didn't forgive him, I admitted. I know, Daniel said, but you let him go, and that's better. For the first time, I believed him. Because letting go isn't the same as losing. It's what makes space for what's still ahead. A month after I saw Robert for the last time, a letter arrived. No return address, no name. Just my own written neatly on the front Turner. The paper felt heavier than it should have, the kind of weight that told you before you even opened it, this will change something. I sat at the kitchen table, the morning sun cutting through the curtains in thin, golden lines. Daniel was at work. The house was quiet except for the soft ticking of the wall clock. I took a deep breath and opened it. If you've ever thought the past had finally finished whispering your name, only to hear it again, clear as a bell when you least expected it, then you'll understand this moment. Like, subscribe, and share. Because sometimes lessons arrive not as punishment, but as peace in disguise. Inside the envelope was a letter from Robert's attorney, written in formal, almost clinical language. Dear Mrs. Turner, Mr. Robert Turner passed away in Zurich 2 weeks ago from complications due to heart failure. In accordance with his final wishes, we have been instructed to deliver to you and your son the enclosed documents. Included are transfer deeds and remaining account authorizations for the Turner Family Foundation, registered in your name and your son. Mr. Turner requested that it be used for the truth, not for redemption. His last statement, handwritten, is also enclosed. My hands shook as I unfolded the smaller sheet tucked behind the papers. It was Robert's handwriting, shaky, uneven, but unmistakable. What? You were always right. Love without honesty is just control. I built empires on that lie, and when I lost you, I finally understood what it cost me. If you're reading this, I'm gone. But I didn't want to leave debts behind, not the kind measured in money, but the kind that weigh on the soul. Use what's left to make something good, something honest, something that carries our name without shame. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but if forgiveness means letting me rest, then maybe that's enough. Oh, Robert, I didn't cry. Not this time. Because somewhere between the fire and the silence, between grief and forgiveness, I had already mourned him, the man he was and the man he tried to be. I looked out the window at the sea, calm and endless. And for the first time, I didn't see tragedy. I saw continuity. When Daniel came home that evening, I showed him the papers. He read them silently, then placed them gently on the table. So, he's really gone. I nodded, this time yes. Daniel exhaled, long and shaky, and he left this for us. Not for us, I said softly, for what comes after us. He frowned, what do you mean? I smiled, we'll use it to fund truth, real truth, not stories to destroy people, stories to save them. Daniel's eyes softened. A foundation for investigative work, journalism, advocacy. Exactly, I said. We'll call it the Turner Foundation for Integrity. He smiled faintly, he'd hate that. Then it's perfect. That night after dinner, we went down to the shore. The wind was cool, the waves brushing gently at our feet. Daniel skipped stones across the water while I stood there, holding the last piece of Robert's letter. I let it slip from my hand, the paper floating away until it sank beneath the surface. Goodbye, Robert, I whispered, this time for real. Daniel looked over, his expression soft. You okay? I nodded, I'm learning to be. On our walk back home, I realized that life had finally come full circle. The lies were gone, the debts paid, the ghosts quiet. All that was left now was the truth. And the peace that follows when you finally stop running from it. In the end, the lesson wasn't about vengeance or forgiveness. It was about understanding that life isn't what happens to us. It's what we choose to build after everything falls apart. And in that quiet truth, I found my redemption. Years later, when people spoke my name, they didn't say the woman whose husband faked his death anymore. They said the founder of the Turner Foundation. And that, in its quiet way, meant everything. The world had changed again. Technology moved faster, lies got sharper, but truth still mattered. And that's what we built our lives around. Truth, kindness, and the belief that people can change even if it takes them a lifetime. If you've stayed with me till now, through the grief, the fire, the betrayals, and the rebuilding, then I want to tell you something. Peace isn't something you find, it's something you build. One choice, one forgiveness, one sunrise at a time. So before we go on, like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs to remember. No matter how dark the night gets, the dawn always comes. Daniel became the voice of integrity in journalism. He used his pain as fuel, his empathy as armor. Every story he wrote exposed not just corruption, but hope that truth could heal. The Turner Foundation grew into something beyond either of us. We funded investigative reporters and young writers who believed honesty was still sacred. And every time a new name joined our cause, I saw a spark of Robert, not the man who lied, but the man who finally understood what truth cost. Sometimes I still visit the sea, the same stretch of shore where everything ended and began. I sit on the old pier, feeling the salt wind against my skin and close my eyes. When the waves crash, I hear echoes, Robert's laughter, Daniel's voice as a boy, the quiet hum of all the moments that built me. But they don't haunt me anymore. They hold me. I've learned something I wish I'd known sooner. You don't have to destroy what hurt you to move on. You just have to stop letting it define you. Pain isn't a punishment, it's a passage. And love, when it's real, doesn't disappear, it just transforms. The last time Daniel and I stood together at Robert's grave, the headstone was simple. Robert Turner, a man who finally told the truth. Daniel placed a single white lily beside it. He got there in the end, he whispered. I smiled, so did we. We stood there in silence, the wind carrying the scent of salt and soil. The sky above us was clear, no storm, no clouds, no ghosts. Just light. And as I walked away, I realized that maybe that's all any of us are really trying to do. To leave behind enough light for someone else to find their way. So, to you listening now, if you're standing in the ruins of something you thought would last forever, if you're holding pieces of a life that doesn't fit anymore, don't give up. Because one day, that brokenness will become your strength. And you'll look back not with regret but with gratitude. You'll see that the fire didn't destroy you. It revealed you. Did this story touch your heart? Tell me in the comments where you're listening from. And remember, truth isn't just about what you say. It's about who you choose to be when no one's watching. Subscribe to Soul Whisper for more stories that remind you. No matter how deep the darkness goes, the light always finds a way through.